Hello, everyone who is listening to us. Today we have another show of Break the Walls, and today with me is Marie-Axelle, and we will talk about robotics, retail, entrepreneurship, an amazing long-time journey. I would say I already met Marie before, and I will be honest, guys, that's amazing. That's impressive, expressive experience, lots of energy, and I believe lots of thousands of, let's say, knowledge. And I believe this conversation will be really interesting, really energetic. So before we get started, I would like Marie-Axelle to give you a word. Maybe you can share as well your perspective about, let's say, your experience from the very, very beginning, and we will follow our conversation flow.
Yeah. So I'm French. I'm 63 years old, so I'm not exactly young. I'm actually very old, my children would say. I grew up in a military family in France, so we were moving every 2 years from one very little town to another little town. And interestingly enough, in those days, it was during the Cold War, and the fear was that the Russians or the Soviets would invade via Germany. So most of the military little towns I lived in were actually in the east of France, because this is where we were expecting the Soviets to invade. And it's known as not the nicest area of France, small towns, rather cold areas by French standards, small towns. I was going to nun schools. It was not an easy life. My mother was super tough. My father was tough. 5 children, growing up in, not easy circumstances. Well, not tough, but demanding. Demanding is probably the word. And then I was doing extremely well at school. My favorite topic was history, and my favorite thing in life is still history. I'm French. Last night I was reading a book about Napoleon. I've read, it comes and goes. I probably started when I was 7 years old, reading books about Napoleon. And that's sometimes because my father is a short guy, brown haired. I was not sure whether I was the daughter of my father or the daughter of Napoleon. So reading lots of history. And then I come from a very traditional Catholic background. So the expectation was I would study, but I would not get a job, because the objective was I needed to get married, I needed to have children, and that was my mission in life. Just it had been my mother's mission in life, my grandmother's mission in life, and my sisters and I were expected to study just in case. Get married, have children, take care of the house, the husband, and the kids. So that was the future I had in front of me. I was doing very well at school, and at some point my father said, after I graduated from high school, so what is called in French, I got my baccalaureate, the final exam of what the Americans would call high school. My father said, I want you to go to business school. Actually, I wanted to study political science. I was super interested in politics because I was interested in history. I was interested in politics. I wanted to go into politics, but my father said, bullshit, you go to business school. Interestingly enough, my father didn't know anything about business. He didn't know anything about business schools. Being in the military, he had no respect for business people. He's 88 years old now, and he still has no respect for business people. His family is, my family on my father's side is mostly lawyers and military people. So no respect for business people. But anyway, he sent me to business school because he said it's safe. You go to business school, afterwards you can do whatever you want. So get a good degree from business school. And that was just because I was doing well at school. I could go to business school, and I went to, in France, you've got to take a competitive exam to get into business school. So you study for 2 years in what is called prep classes. And then you take the competitive exam and you get to business, one of the various business schools. I actually managed, I did well at prep classes, and then I eventually got admitted into the best business school in France, which is called HEC Paris. Got there. My first 3 months were just horrendous. I loved history, I loved economics, I loved geography. And then the first 3 months was all about accounting. So I was crying, I was calling my parents, what am I doing here? My parents didn't care because they didn't know what accounting was. So they didn't care. Like, she got into the best business school in France. Okay, she doesn't like accounting, but it's fine. It's fine. Nobody worries about the fact that she hates accounting. But I was so depressed because, I would have wanted to talk about geopolitics, and actually we were doing basic accounting. Eventually survived the 3 years of business school, but I was interested in lots of other things. I was playing in a band, so I was playing bass guitar in a band. I was super bad. I remember we did a concert in the east of France, in Nancy, one day. I was playing the bass and I was singing, and I was so bad. People were throwing coins at me, like the minimal value coins, like she doesn't deserve more than a few cents, So my musical career didn't go anywhere. I was keen, but I was like a catastrophe. I was interested in history still. I was interested in English, but I was not interested in accounting. In year 3 at business school, I got interested in 2 things. I got interested in IT, which at the time was very basic. The school had two computers. I can't remember. There were probably small IBM mainframes. I'm not even sure. I'm talking about 1983. But I started coding in BASIC. So I did some coding, and I got this attraction for IT. And I also liked marketing. Marketing was cool. I liked retail, because I liked shopping, so I liked retail. But actually, this was the beginning of, I did so many things in retail over the years. So, but when people ask me, why did you go into retail? Well, I went into retail because I love shopping,
Yeah, the truth is so simple. Wow.
Yes. So I got interested in retail. I got interested in IT. When I was in year 3 at business school, I actually took a job in a small company that was developing software for public entities. So like towns and public administration. I was not understanding much, but I was keen, and I was making money doing this. And then my father, when I graduated, my father said, now you've got a degree, so you go and work. And I was like, I'm not sure. So I went to fashion design school for a year, which had nothing to do with, nothing to do with business school. Actually, I had been to business school. I had a business degree. I went to fashion design school. I could have started a fashion business, but no. After a year at fashion design school, I went to work for Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture. And it was because it was prestigious in these days to go and work for Anderson Consulting. Anderson had 2 divisions, the audit division, which eventually closed down during the Enron scandal in the early 2000s. And then Anderson Consulting, which was more management consulting and was lots of IT actually. First 3 weeks, so I started with them, first 3 weeks, They used to send us, they're still sending people to this place, to a campus near Chicago in a place called St. Charles. And we were doing 3 weeks, 60 hours per week, because we were working every day except Sunday morning, because in the US, Sunday morning you go to church. So they sent us to St. Charles, Illinois. But the rest of the time we were doing COBOL coding. So we coded in COBOL. So it was, the basics of working for Andersen Consulting in the 80s was doing 3 weeks of COBOL coding. And then I learned many things about IT in those years, but some of the things, I'm really glad I learned them in the 80s, because databases, networking, things like this are still valid concept. And I remember we had an American instructor, a guy who used to work for Andersen Consulting in the US and then transferred to Paris. And I remember it was 1984. He told us about artificial intelligence.
Wow.
So I've been hearing about artificial intelligence since 1984.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
I was even not born.
Yeah. So, and I remember, because lots of things I know about IT actually, come from these days, computer networking, basic stuff, but that are still relevant and actually helped me through my career understand IT, although I'm not an IT person, but I probably had in some years a better understanding than non-IT people about IT. And I'm working with this founder in London, who's a Russian guy who graduated in computer science from Lomonosov University in Moscow. And when he speaks to me and he explains things, I understand what he's talking about. Yes.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's
probably not everything, because I didn't study computer science, but I can talk I can have reasonable conversations. I can explain to clients, data exchanges, APIs, things like this. I can explain. So that was the basics when I was working at Andersen Consulting. I did COBOL coding. I did other languages. I did Fortran at some point, which I'm not a math expert, but I also learned how to code in Fortran. So, I've got a little bit of IT background. And then I worked in finance for a few years. I didn't like finance, but again, things I learned in those early days in finance still are still useful to me. And then in 1990, so it's been 35 years, I was hired by a family office, so again, finance. They had invested in a retail company in the US, small retail company, 60 stores, selling home furnishings in the US with a very French flavor. And I had joined the week I joined the company, they said, "Oh, you're going to New York for 6 weeks." And I said, "Well, listen, I don't even own a suitcase, so let me buy a suitcase, because if I'm going to New York for 6 weeks, I need to buy a suitcase." So I bought a suitcase, went to New York for 6 weeks. I actually stayed 6 months. And I discovered retail. And, because I was working for the owners of that retail chain, or the part owners, but controlling owners, I was given missions from Paris, like I was managing cash flow. There was no reporting. I put a reporting in place. And then the president of the retail company, that retail company in the US, was a French guy. He understood very well that because I was from the owners, he had to be super nice with me. So he actually took me to many meetings, trips, and I learned retail from this guy, actually. It was really super interesting. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So I stayed 2 years with these guys. I was going, and it was kind of glamorous. I was traveling between Paris, New York, and sometimes London. So I had this triangle: Paris, New York, London. I felt, like, I've made it. I'm in New York all the time. It was kind of cool. And then they offered me a job in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And that could have been the turning point in my life. You could be speaking to a Californian woman. I would be blonde with big hair, lots of cosmetic surgery. But I was in love with a guy who was living in Paris, Eastern European guy, half Ukrainian, half Romanian, but living in Paris. He had left Romania where he had grown up. So I turned down the job in Beverly Hills because of the guy in Paris. So, and I gave priority to my private life. I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And remember, my parents had told me what's important is getting married, having children, blah, blah, blah. So gave priority to the guy. I'm always thinking of this, like what would have happened if I had taken the job in Beverly Hills, I would be an American, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe I would be rich. I would be an American living in California, living in Beverly Hills. You never know. When didn't take the job, went back to Paris, was hired by a big corporate. The big corporate no longer exists under this name, but this was a big corporate called an American company based in North Carolina called Sara Lee, and they were buying textile companies in Europe. So they were buying companies in Europe that were making underwear and socks and pantyhose, and they were like consolidating an industry in Europe. And I was hired to actually start a retail business, a direct-to-consumer business, because these businesses selling underwear and socks and activewear as well, they were selling to the big retailers. So they were selling to Tesco, Carrefour, but they wanted to start a direct-to-consumer business. And that was before the internet, because that was in 94. Well, that was when the internet became a thing. Because at the same time, my husband, he had become my husband. Well, he was not my husband yet, but eventually became my husband. He's an architect, and he was sent to the US. So I had turned down a job in the US on the West Coast, but he took a job where he was spending time on the East Coast in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah.
And that was before email. That was before, but we were speaking on the phone every day when he was in Philadelphia, all funded by our respective companies. So we were calling on company money. So I did this, started some retail stores in France and in the UK for this company. And then, so that was something that I love doing, which is developing new businesses inside big corporates. So my thing is about developing new businesses, growing new businesses, working with startups, but also working with new ventures inside big companies.
Mm-hmm.
So I did this retail thing. Then I was hired by the Walt Disney Company to actually develop a new channel for the Disney merchandise, so the T-shirts with the Snow White and the hat with Mickey Mouse. I developed mail order catalogs in Europe in partnership with people who had established mail order business. So mail order business was like e-commerce, but you were buying from a paper catalog. You were sending back through the post your order form, or you were calling to order. And then because that was like the second half of the 90s, eventually we started looking at e-commerce. So I started in e-commerce in 1997. And my children, who were born in 97 and 99, when I said I started in e-commerce in 97, they said, it did not exist. I said, well, it did exist. it did exist because I started in e-commerce in 97. And then Disney in Europe, they had a tough period around 99, 2000. And 99, 2000 was what was called the first internet bubble. So there were lots of startups coming up. And I got a call, I got many offers. I got an offer from the guy who had started building Amazon in France. I remember that was the end of 99, and I turned down the job, not because I was already buying books from Amazon in the US and getting them shipped in Europe. So I knew Amazon already, but I didn't take the job because the office of Amazon was too far away from my house. So I didn't take it. It was just, so I missed the Amazon opportunity just because the commute was too long. But I had two very young kids. I had a working
Hello, but before we will continue, I just want to let you know where you can find the best product design and web development services. And that's the company called Core. So here in our company, you can get the most tremendous and exciting UI UX design services combined with web development skills. Moreover, you can use our excellent calculator staff just to collect your order, because again, Core is where unicorns are made. And if you want to get your $1 billion company, you definitely need to have a nice design and development co-founder. And Core focusing on B2B, startups, products, any other technical company, especially in Web3, AI, and fintech fields. So here you can see a bit more about our benefits against agencies, freelancers, hiring processes. So it's always better to have your own in-house team. So don't hesitate. Explore our services in our website, evencore.com. Explore our case studies, and let's make something beautiful. So looking forward for you below. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and let's move on.
So it was super complicated. So I turned down the Amazon job, but
That's crazy. Yeah.
that's crazy. And I would have been one of the first few employees at Amazon in France, actually. Turned down the job. I went to work for a startup that lasted for a year. That was, they were doing something that no longer exists, but it was called group buying. So basically they were saying, thanks to the network effect of the internet, we're going to be building communities of 100 people who want the same TV from Philips, and we're going to go and tell Philips or LG. LG did not exist in Europe at the time, so it was all European brands, or Samsung did not exist, so it was Philips. We would go to Philips and say, we've aggregated demand. We've got 100 people wanting the same TV. What is your price? Please give us a volume discount. So this was called group buying. And actually there was so I was working for this French startup, which was called cluster, because they were clustering demand. Well-funded, lots of VC money. And the guy who was running this company, he said, oh, Marie-Axelle, you speak better English than I do, so can you work on international development? So Mondays so the company was based in France. Mondays I was in London, Tuesdays I was in Munich, Wednesdays I was in Milan, Thursdays I was in Madrid. Then I was coming home or going to Brazil. So I also incorporated a subsidiary in Brazil. Then what happened, I remember the date, it was April 14th of 2000. So it's been 25 years. Wow. It was April 14th. I've got a very good memory of dates. So it was April 14th of 2020. The NASDAQ went down. And then funding stopped. So we never raised our second financing round, and we were out of business after after a year. Then I was hired by Priceline, which now is a big online travel agency, but at the time was a small business, started in 1997. So it was 3 years or 4 years old when I was hired. And they were starting Priceline Europe based out of London. So my husband was working in Paris. My children were living in Paris, and I was kind of commuting between Paris and London. And my husband said, I don't believe in this business model. I don't believe in this company. I'm not moving to London. So he didn't want to relocate. And you know what? Actually, something very bad happened, September 11th of 2001. So the travel industry was very badly affected, and eventually Priceline closed their London office. So I was back in Paris, and my husband said, see, it's good that I didn't relocate with the children to London. Then I got a call from a headhunter saying, the first question was, do you have anything against Brussels? And I was on holidays. I was on holidays in Spain with my husband and children. So I told my husband, say, do you have anything against Brussels? He said, no, I'm fine. I've got plenty of Romanian friends in Brussels. We can go and live in Brussels. I interviewed, blah, blah, blah. I had 14 interviews in Brussels and near Boston in Framingham. And I got a job offer from Staples, which at the time was a big US office supplies chain. And the job they offered me was to be the new head of e-commerce for Staples in Europe. They had e-commerce in the US. Office supplies was very early to e-commerce. So they adopted e-commerce very early on because they had paper catalogs, which eventually they transitioned to the internet. And they wanted to replicate that success in Europe. So I was hired to actually launch e-commerce for Staples in Germany and the UK. Launched e-commerce for Staples in Germany and the UK. We did super well because they had a catalog business already. So they had call centers, they had fulfillment centers. So we did super well. And then my boss at Staples Europe, who had been a colleague at Disney, actually, he moved to Sephora Europe. He became the president of Sephora Europe. So he took me with him. And he said, you do exactly the same. You need to launch e-commerce for Sephora in Europe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was 2004. Sephora US, which had been established in 1999, first with stores, already had a $200 million e-commerce business in the US. And my boss, who was the head of Europe, he said, you know what? You go to San Francisco. Wow, I go to San Francisco. You go to San Francisco, you speak to the Sephora US team, and you do exactly the same. So I went to San Francisco. We developed the website with a company based in San Francisco. And after 8 months, we launched e-commerce for Sephora in France. Did super well. Sephora was it's a French company, but that already had entities across Europe and the US. It did super well. We were the first big beauty chain to actually go online in France. So it went super well. It went so well that at the end of 2005, I go and present my e-commerce numbers for France to LVMH, because Sephora is owned by the big luxury group, the big LVMH luxury group. So I go and present my numbers. And the number 2 at the time at LVMH, the CEO of the group, he said, Marie-Axelle, I give you 2 million euros. You go and do the same in China. So off I go to China with my 2 million euros budget. Sephora had 4 stores in China at the time, only 4 stores, 0 brand awareness. And believe it or not, in 2006, e-commerce did not exist in China. It was not, it did not exist yet.
Really? Wow.
So I go to China. First thing is, they tell me you need to hire an e-commerce manager, and you're going to teach the e-commerce manager how to run, everything e-commerce. So I go to China. We cannot find an e-commerce manager because e-commerce did not exist. So we took someone from L'Oréal. She was Chinese. The only thing she had is she spoke very good French. So she didn't know e-commerce. And for 2 weeks, I teach her what e-commerce is all about. 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. She wanted to work 7 days a week, very Chinese. I said, I need to stop on Sundays. I need to recharge my battery. But we were in Shanghai. I was talking from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. She was asking very good questions. This was so tiring. And, it was knowledge transfer. Basically, she was absorbing. It was super interesting because she was absorbing everything I knew. So I was sharing my experience and doing a knowledge transfer type of thing. Then I looked for somebody who could build me a website, run my call center, and do the fulfillment. Interestingly enough, I found a German company that was starting their business in Shanghai. They're very well established at the 3PL in Europe. They're called Arvato. Like where I'm working now, we sell them robotic arms. And Arvato had just established their entity in Shanghai, and I became their first client.
Wow.
For building the website, doing the call center, and doing fulfillment, the initial setup cost was 66,000 euros. I had a 2 million budget. We launched for, let's say, 80,000 euros when I had been given a 2 million budget. I could have gone shopping in Shanghai with that money, I should have. I didn't because I'm very honest, so I didn't use the money. But, I only spent like 80,000 euros. We launched e-commerce in China. It didn't do very well in the beginning, but it was really an experience. China in 2006, when I was there, I was listening, I was not talking because I realized I didn't know anything. China made me feel like I didn't know anything. I went to see an advertising agency and I said, I want to buy Google AdWords. And at the time, Google was still doing business in China. So I meet with the CEO of the Shanghai entity of a US advertising agency. Mm-hmm. I won't say the name because this is a well-established advertising agency. I go to the guy, CEO. I said, I want to buy Google AdWords. He looks at me and he says, what is Google AdWords? So I was so surprised, but then I realized they probably had not launched AdWords in China. And maybe they never launched AdWords in China. I was not fully aware of the emerging e-commerce and digital marketing landscape in China. I was shocked because the guy didn't know what I was used to work with. I was really shocked. But then I realized, I was like, okay, shut up. Don't ask for what you know. Listen to what they suggest. And this was a very humbling experience where you have to realize that this is a market you don't know. So you shall not replicate what works for you in other countries. You shall just listen to what they are suggesting and then discuss and understand. So it was very humbling. It was super humbling. And then after I launched e-commerce in China, I went back to France, and the president of Sephora Europe, he said, okay, well done. Now I want you to work on the international expansion of the stores in many countries. So he said, your English is good enough. Can you help with the international expansion? So I worked on acquisitions. And, acquisitions was actually going to the countries, checking the stores. So I remember we worked on an acquisition in Ukraine. So I went to Kiev, I went to check the stores. Something incredible happened, because the moment we were about to sign the acquisition, a Russian guy, it was eventually the chain we wanted to acquire was acquired by a Russian guy, but it was kind of very shady, very shady, very shady. So the guy who was selling basically got a counter offer from a Russian guy. But the Russian guy, of course, had tied with the FSB, blah, blah, blah. Like the usual story, with, better than I do. So we wanted to buy this chain. We never bought it because the Russian guy put his hand on the chain. I also did acquisitions in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, but then I recommended not to buy the chain because the stores were very small. The shape, I remember one store in Vilnius which had a very strange shape, and the location was good, but we could not have turned this into a proper Sephora store. And then I did joint venture negotiation with a Turkish retailer, and that took us a year because joint venture negotiations can be super complicated. We had long sessions, French lawyers, Turkish lawyers. It was super complicated. The day we signed, my boss told me, "You're moving to Istanbul on Monday." We signed on Friday. He said, "You're moving to Istanbul on Monday." I moved to Istanbul, started the Sephora stores business in Turkey, and then made all the cultural mistakes possible, like advertising makeup during Ramadan. Things like this. I had a Turkish marketing director, so she told me, "Marie-Axelle, don't do this." But in 2000, that was 2007, Istanbul was still was not very religious. Things have changed, but people were not observant of Ramadan. But still, I was told it would be outrageous to advertise makeup during Ramadan. So all the mistakes you do when you are living in another country with another religion, etc. But that was good. That was good because, you learn that you think you're smart and actually you make stupid mistakes by, and it's cultural diversity, things you don't know, things you're not sensitive to. So did that. And then went back to France after a year because we had decided that because of my cultural mistakes, we needed a Turkish country manager, director. So we hired someone from L'Oréal, and she became the country director for Sephora in Turkey. I went back. I was offered other jobs in Romania and in the Netherlands, but I was divorcing my husband. And my lawyer says, "What do you want, your career or your children?" I said, "My children have priority." So I decided to stop traveling. I didn't take the jobs in Romania, and Romania would have been fantastic. It was kind of, I wanted to be the country manager of Sephora for Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, and Serbia, based in Romania. But my lawyer said, "Don't take it. You're going to lose custody of your children. If you want your children, you need to make sacrifices on the job front." So for a few years, I made sacrifices on the job front and took care of my children because I was getting divorced. Then I became a retail and e-commerce consultant. So I started the French business of a UK consultancy called Javelin Group, which is now owned by Accenture Strategy. So it was kind of a return to Anderson/Accenture. Developed their consulting business in France. I had lots of clients in the top 100 retailers in France, developed a good consulting business. Then I was hired by IBM as part of a team of 30 global retail experts. So my boss was in Chicago. Interestingly enough, I actually spoke to him last night because I need an intro into Walmart and he's going to help me with this. So my boss was in Chicago, and he would call me. He said, "Marie-Axelle, can you go to Melbourne tomorrow?" I said, "Bill, listen, not tomorrow because it takes 24 hours to go to Australia, but I can meet the client in 48 hours." So I was on the road all the time again. I would leave my children on their own. My son was 15 years old. I remember I was in Melbourne. The phone is ringing in the middle of the Australian night. I pick up the phone. It's my son who's calling me, say, "Mama, I cannot find the clean bed sheets." I was like, okay, I get it. You want to speak to me. The bed sheets is just, it's not, the problem is not the clean bed sheets. You want to speak to your mom. So I know it's the middle of the night, but I'm going to speak to you. So I did this for 5 years. And then I was hired by Ocado in the UK. So Ocado started life in 2000 as an online grocery business. And then eventually they realized that the superb combination of software and robotics, which they had developed for their own business, they could sell to other people. So they called me. They say, "Would you be interested? Would you move to the UK?" Blah, blah, blah. I say, "Yeah, I'll move to the UK." My son was actually studying in London, so that was fine. At some point, my daughter took a job with Amazon in the UK, so we were like reunited in the United Kingdom. And I joined Ocado, and these were the years where we did the big deals with Kroger, which actually, it was announced 2 days ago that they're going to close down 3 of their Ocado fulfillment centers. But things in online grocery have changed dramatically since COVID. So the years I was at Ocado, we were doing super well. We had done a deal with, before I joined, they had done a deal with Groupe Casino in France. So I looked at the implementation of the automated fulfillment center of Groupe Casino in France. We closed the deal with Kroger a few weeks after I joined in 2018. We closed the deal with ICA in Sweden. So there are a few automated warehouses in Sweden run by Ocado. We closed the deal with Coles in Australia, which was 4 years in the making. So selling very expensive and very complex software and robotics can have a super long sales cycle. And what I've learned in sales is that it always takes longer than you hope, but the 4-year sales cycle was quite something. Last but not least, I took 9 trips to Japan to sell that solution to the number 2 grocery retailer in Japan. And then I have Ocado-powered automated warehouses in the Tokyo area. And I would say that selling UK robotics to Japan, to a Japanese company, where, there are lots of robotics in Japan, but that was quite something. Again, the culture, the culture was, the cultural element of selling to Japan was, Japan I advertised makeup during Ramadan in Turkey. Then I learned that, you've got to be super sensitive to cultural differences. So I did all the bowing that you do in Japan. I did all the dinners. I did all the, and doing business in Japan is really different from doing business in Europe or in the US. But, it requires persistence, but I think it took us 2 years and we closed the deal with Japan. Then exactly at the moment of COVID, I was hired by Philip Morris to go and join their big transformation project in Switzerland. Moved to Switzerland the week of COVID. That, taking a new job the week of COVID was a complete catastrophe. I only stayed 12 months with them, left them. And then since then, I've been working mostly with startups. The beauty of working from home, I hated COVID. I hate working from home, but I love working from home because I'm working with 2 companies in Poland. I'm working with a guy in the Netherlands. I'm working with this guy in London. I'm speaking to you and you are in Poland. So I hate the loneliness of working from home. I hate it. I hate it. But, and I love going to an office in Warsaw or in London. But at the same time, working from home has opened so many opportunities for me. I got a call last week for a job with a company based in Norway. I'm getting, I spoke to a French VC yesterday about helping them with a company in France. So I hate to work from home, and at the same time, it has opened opportunities. It has changed the way I work. So I work with startups. You know what, startups very often, they don't have the relationships and they're scared to call CEOs or CEOs. So they need the old people to actually knock on doors of people they know, and I know lots of people, or actually cold CEOs. And what I love doing these days is actually going to trade shows and conferences, meeting people face to face and selling face to face. So I was in London last week. I spoke at a robotics conference. I went to a supply chain conference, trade show. And what I would love to do now is actually be on planes all the time, go to trade shows, engage with people, and sell face to face.
Yeah, from this story, I just noticed that in your case, your life in general, it's like a big plane, to be honest.
It's not very good for the planet. It's not very good for the planet.
But that's very interesting. Lots of experience, I would say, in especially different situations. And yeah, as you said right now, even lots of new things coming on.
Hello, but before we will continue, I just want to let you know where you can find the best product design and web development services. And that's the company called Core. So here in our company, you can get the most tremendous and exciting UI UX design services combined with web development skills. Moreover, you can use our excellent calculator staff just to collect your order, because again, Core is where unicorns are made. And if you want to get your $1 billion company, you definitely need to have a nice design and development co-founder. And Core focusing on B2B, startups, products, any other technical company, especially in Web3, AI, and fintech fields. So here you can see a bit more about our benefits against agencies, freelancers, hiring processes. So it's always better to have your own in-house team. So don't hesitate. Explore our services in our website, evencore.com. Explore our case studies, and let's make something beautiful. So looking forward for you below. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and let's move on.
I mean, and you are handling that, so that's really amazing. I'm not sure what your children saying to you, but if I were your son, I would say my mom is super mom, because for what things you did in your life, that's really just only superhumans can do. That's what I wanted to say after hearing this story. And maybe I have like one final question, which is very interesting to me personally, and I guess for everyone. What is your key takeaways from your life, business life, across all of these years?
So, one bad thing in my life, one very bad thing in my life has been, still is, my very traditional education, very dutiful, very obedient, Catholic military family. Because in many instances, I was not daring enough, I was not daring enough. I was very obedient. I was, my parents were very strict, each one in their own style, but they were super strict. When I give priority to my children, when I got divorced, etc. I'm super happy I did it. They have good jobs. They are great adults. I'm very happy I gave them priority. But I've been very much shaped by this image of mothers and women having to sacrifice themselves for their husbands, their family, their house, and having a career somehow was not exactly permitted. It was not, it was not well considered, because somehow there was an image of a woman who has a career, makes her own money, she's got too much freedom, she's free to, the atmosphere in my family is and was and still is, a woman shall never be too free, because otherwise she's gonna have lovers, she's gonna have a life that doesn't fit with the Catholic framework of so I've been really, and I'm still am very limited by my family culture, my family, and the culture I grew up with, and going to nun schools, and the expectations on women, having to sacrifice oneself. My mother was always saying, I'm sacrificing myself for my 5 children. And my sisters and I, we always say we hate this, but we still probably at the back of our minds still have this duty of sacrifice, and this has been horrible. And I'm always telling my daughter is super free. She's a super strong feminist, and I'm really happy she is. I'm so happy she is. It's probably all the Eastern European blood. She's very tough. She's like our Ukrainian grandmother, who was a very tough woman.
Definitely.
It was funny because you know what? In the Soviet era, and the countries which were in the Soviet orbit, women all had jobs. So there was actually, the women were more advanced, and it may sound shocking, but my ex-mother-in-law, who died this year in Bucharest, my Ukrainian ex-mother-in-law, actually, she always had a job. She was a very tough woman. She didn't have this Catholic thing because she was Orthodox. So she didn't have this Catholic thing of being a good mother, being nice to your husband. She had it, but at the same time, she had a real career. She built museums she designed and built museums in Romania. She was a real architect. It was not like she was a mother and then an architect. She was an architect and then a mother, So that when I met my husband, I realized that during the Soviet era, and Eastern Europe in general was much more advanced in terms of women building life, having careers.
Yeah, definitely agree. Very interesting topic, to be honest. But yeah, I would agree. When you always everyone wanted to have plans, everyone wanted to have a life, but different circumstances always affecting you. And as you said, the most important here is not the circumstances; it's just an influence from some kind of model which existed a long time ago. And boom, we need to follow it because no one have a proper answer to that, because and that's maybe the biggest problem, I guess, here. But again, I still believe, so even with that, let's say, turning down points, you still had very, very big long time journey with lots of let's say tweaks, situations, opportunities, and I'm really impressed. And even right now, lots of energy, lots of things, lots of life, I believe. Maybe that's my thing, my thought. That's because you experience it in your life, some kind of limitations, and maybe right now you just wanted to get back all of this time.
Maybe maybe. And you know what? I was thinking this morning, I was getting prepared for this interview, and I was thinking, I never made money. I was not interested in money. I was, money doesn't matter. I was interested in building things and building new things. So, when I started in e-commerce in 1997, I was interested in building things. I think the key thing in life is being curious about things. And as I wrote to you a few weeks ago, getting interested in new technologies is absolutely essential in terms of jobs opportunities. And the interesting thing is, and any book on strategy or things will tell you that a technology is new, so you start working in it, but then it becomes mainstream. So 1997, there were very few people working in e-commerce. Working in e-commerce in 2025 is nothing special.
Yeah.
Working in robotics is still something special because the industry is growing 15% per year. So it's still something new. But maybe in 7 years' time, everybody will have experience with robotics and it won't be anything new. And then you've got generative AI, but as I told you, AI was already there in 1984. And then there's quantum computing, etc. But you shall always get early on onto the next wave, because being early to a technology gives you so many job opportunities.
Yeah.
But sometimes you choose the wrong technologies as well. Am I sad that I didn't get on the blockchain bandwagon? I remember I was at IBM in 2016, and we did a meeting. We were trying to find use cases for blockchain.
Crazy story. Actually, everything is already exists. And yeah, as you said, right now it's like something special. But if that's something special, that's a huge opportunity to be the first. Because in a couple of years, it will be already a routine. And that's like evolution, let's say. For a long time ago, just common sticks was something. But right now it's nothing. Great. I want to thank you so much for this amazing interview, for this huge story. It's already inspired me, and I will, after this conversation, I will talk to my wife to explain to her how it was and etc. Because there's really lots of interesting things, and I guess everyone who will listen this has the same opinions. So I want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I was so happy. I'm very happy I did this.
Oh, I'm so happy too. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Taras. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye. Cool.